The day his wife gave birth, Mark was the happiest man alive. He didn't just buy balloons and flowers, he bought a whole house. "New baby. New beginning," he said, grinning like a man who'd just won the lottery. Emily, on the other hand, looked like she'd been through 10 rounds of boxing with life itself. 9 months of nausea, swollen feet, midnight cravings, and emotional breakdowns over burnt toast. Mark used to joke that pregnancy wasn't 9 months long, it was 9 years packed into one. Every night, he'd rub her belly, whispering to the baby like a coach giving a halftime speech. "Hang in there, champ. We're almost at the finish line." He'd drive across town at 2 in the morning just to buy mangoes because the baby wants it. He learned that prenatal care didn't just mean vitamins, it meant surviving a pregnant woman's temper. And somehow, through all the sleepless nights, back rubs, and mood swings, he loved her even more. By the time the due date arrived, Mark was ready. He'd packed the hospital bag, double-checked the baby seat, and even practiced saying, "Push, babe, push," in the mirror. He was a man prepared for everything, or so he thought. The night the contractions started, he became a one-man emergency service. He threw on the first clothes, he found a dress shirt, gym shorts, and 2 different shoes, and skidded into the hospital driveway like a stunt driver who'd never learned to park. Emily squeezed his hand and hissed, "This is all your fault." He nodded with a serious face. "I take full responsibility for the moon, the tides, and all related contractions." Then the room sharpened into a single, fragile sound, a newborn's cry. It cut through the fluorescent hum, through the nurse's chatter, through Mark's clumsy jokes, and wrapped itself around his heart like a promise. He laughed and cried at the same time, kissed Emily's forehead, and whispered, "We did it." Time for a few minutes was perfect. In the quiet that followed, he looked down. The light overhead flickered, warm, then cool, the way hospital lights do. Something in his chest stuttered. It was a small thing, a flicker of doubt that he swatted away as quickly as it came. Adrenaline? He told himself. Stress. Bad lighting. He smiled wider, louder, as if joy could drown out a whisper. They went home and life turned into a beautiful, messy orchestra. Bottles clinked, lullabies looped, laundry multiplied in the dark. Mark became a diaper ninja. He timed himself. 2 minutes flat. He sent his brother a text. "World record. Tell the Olympic Committee," Emily snorted, then fell asleep mid-smile, mid-sentence, mid-breath, the kind of sleep that looks like surrender and victory at once. Friends came by with casseroles and advice nobody asked for. "Sleep when the baby sleeps," they said, which was hilarious because the baby slept in 11-minute bursts like a tiny, adorable alarm system with no snooze button. Mark learned to rock, sway, bounce, hum, and bargain with a person who could not understand language but clearly ran the house. Weeks drifted by. The whisper he'd buried under confetti and midnight feedings began to find little windows to breathe. In photos, in the soft morning light, when the baby yawned or scrunched his face, Mark would feel it, a blink, a hitch, a question. He told himself he was ridiculous. He told himself genetics could be a mystery, and babies change, and people talk too much. He told himself to stop staring at pixels on a phone screen like they could tell the future. But whispers have gravity. One afternoon, as he pushed the stroller down their sunny street, Mrs. Lang from next door leaned over the hedge and said in that careful voice people use when they want you to hear something and forgive them at the same time, "He's precious. He reminds me of a little boy I used to nanny years ago." She paused, searching his face. "You never know how traits appear, right? Genes are funny." "Very funny," Mark said, but his smile felt stapled on. That night he stood in the bathroom with the light too bright and stared at himself. The blue of his eyes, the color of his skin. He looked ordinary, familiar. He looked like every family photo that had ever hung in his parents' hallway. He pressed his palms to the sink and told the man in the mirror to stop drowning a good life in bad thoughts. The more he fought it, the more the world seemed to prod. A cousin joked at a barbecue. "If that kid grows up to be a basketball star, I want season tickets," a cashier said. "Your son's eyes are beautiful." And Mark heard something the cashier hadn't said. He started taking longer routes through the grocery. He started to laugh too loud at jokes that weren't funny. He started to look everywhere but where the answers might be. Emily noticed. She noticed how he took more overtime, how he lingered in the garage after work like the oil cans could talk him into peace, how the photos on his phone stopped multiplying. She noticed the way his body was present, but his mind stood in a locked room down the hall. One night while the baby slept, she turned off the TV and said, "What are you not saying?" He swallowed. "Nothing. I'm just tired." "Then say the tired thing," she said gently. "Say the thing that's keeping you awake." He shook his head too fast. "I don't want to hurt you." "You're already hurting me," she whispered, and the room became a tiny boat on a rough ocean. He tried, in the clumsy way of people too proud to be scared. "I love you," he began. "Do you think I cheated on you?" she asked, soft as a prayer and sharp as a blade. The question hovered. He couldn't catch it. He couldn't kill it. He couldn't say no. The silence he gave her was worse than any accusation. She nodded like someone had told her the weather forecast for a storm that already soaked her to the bone. Days grew heavy. People with opinions felt braver. A distant aunt called with a small, poisonous laugh. "I always wondered if you two rushed marriage." Mark hung up, then tried to scrub his hands as if voices could stain skin. He started sleeping on the couch, claiming it made night feedings easier, as if he was the one waking every 2 hours to feed and soothe and sing. 3 months later, the whisper had become a chorus he couldn't quiet. He packed a bag. He stood in the doorway, every inch of him in mutiny. Emily held the baby and said, "Space from what? From the truth? Or from us?" The baby cooed, unaware. Mark kissed his son's forehead. The boy smelled like milk and heaven. I'll check in," he said. Then he left, as if doors opened to men with broken backs. The divorce arrived folded and official and cold. They were polite, even tender in the useless ways that cannot fix what pride wrecks. Emily kept the nursery. Mark kept the house he'd bought in a burst of joy. It felt too big now, like a joke that lasted too long. The years that followed were made of almosts. He almost texted on the boy's first birthday. He almost drove by the park on a Saturday because he'd heard a child laugh that sounded like a memory. He almost believed the story he told himself that leaving had been noble, that doubt needed space to become truth. He almost became a man he could live with again. Time does not heal what you refuse to face. It just teaches your wounds to speak in quieter voices. On a winter afternoon, after a morning of emails and coffee that tasted like cardboard, his phone rang. "Mr. Weldon?" a voice asked. "This is Street Augustine Medical. We're calling regarding a minor named Noah Weldon. We have you listed as a potential emergency contact." He couldn't feel his hands. Is he okay?" "We need a quick DNA test for family matching," the woman said, the professional kindness that means everything and nothing. "It's routine to expand our donor pool when we can't find a compatible match immediately." He heard his heartbeat in his mouth. He said yes. He said he'd be there in an hour. He didn't remember the drive, only the fluorescent lobby and the little foam cup of water and the way his name sounded when a nurse said it like it belonged to a father. He saw Emily first. She looked like grace that had been wrung out and hung in the sun. Stronger, quieter, older around the eyes. She stood as if she'd been practicing not to fall apart for 7 years and didn't want to fail on an ordinary Tuesday. "You came," she said. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what thing?" she asked. "The one you did or the one you never admitted to doing?" "For both," he breathed. There, behind the curtain, lay a boy. Tubes whispered, and monitors kept time. The child's face was turned toward the window, and sunlight decided to be kind. Mark stepped closer, and something inside him broke and bloomed at once. He saw himself, not the mirror self he used to check for proof, but the kind of self that appears when you stop trying to win and start trying to love. The boy had his jaw, his brow, his little stubborn half-smile even in sleep. The blood test took 5 minutes. The waiting took a lifetime crammed into 48 hours. He walked loops around his living room like he was haunting a place he hadn't earned. He found the box of baby clothes he'd never given, the stuffed giraffe, the tiny socks. He sat on the floor and wept into the future that might still forgive him. The envelope looked ordinary. He opened it with ordinary hands and read words that rearranged the furniture of his entire life. Paternity probability, 99.98%. He laughed a cracked sound that was almost a sob, almost a prayer. He read it again, expecting Mercy to change its mind. It didn't. He went back to the hospital where his son was learning to be brave. He stood in the doorway and memorized the boy again. He turned to Emily and said, "I am sorry for every story I let other people tell me about us. I'm sorry for waking up late to a life you were already living." "Do better than sorry," she said. "Be here." He was. He learned the language of beeping machines. He learned which nurses laughed at bad jokes and which ones cried in supply closets after hard shifts. He braided paper cranes out of cafeteria napkins and lined them on the windowsill like a flock that had chosen this room as a temporary sky. He held Noah's hand, and when fear tried to make a home in his throat, he hummed a melody from a reel-to-reel that now lived on his phone, a grainy recording of a trumpet bending the night into something that didn't hurt. On discharge day, the nurse wheeled Noah to the elevator and joked, "You ready to go home, champ?" Noah nodded solemnly and looked up at Mark. "Are you coming with us?" he asked. Mark knelt so they were eye to eye. "I'm not just coming," he said. "I'm staying." The days after that were not a montage of instant redemption. They were practical and ordinary and holy. Homework spread like maps across the kitchen table, a leaky faucet that needed 3 trips to the hardware store, a Saturday morning where pancakes burned and smoke alarms proved they still had voices. Trust did not bloom like a fireworks finale. It germinated in coffee grounds and carpool lines and the unglamorous art of showing up on time. On a late spring evening, they sat on the back steps with lemonade that was too sour because Noah had insisted on squeezing the lemons himself. Fireflies stitched green stitches across the dusk. Emily said, "Do you still have the necklace?" He wore the tiny trumpet on a chain beneath his shirt. He pulled it out, and it flashed like a small piece of sun. "I want Noah to have it one day," he said. "Tell him the story when he's ready," she said. "All of it. Not because the world deserves your truth, but because he does." He nodded. He knew that stories are how families don't lose themselves. That truths kept in storage units are still truths, but they can't feed anyone. He asked Emily to walk with him the next Sunday. No destination, just a loop that passed the church where they had said vows that were too human to be perfect. He took a breath that felt like a beginning. "I can't undo the years," he said. "I can only build new ones that know how to carry the old. I want to try. I want to be your friend until you trust me to be more. I want to be his father in ways that don't require announcements." She listened without rescuing him from his own sentences. "There's a part of me that wants to run into your arms," she said. "There's another part that wants to make you stand out here with a bouquet of apologies for a year." "I'll stand," he said. "I'll bring water. I'll bring a chair for you. I'll bring patience." She smiled the kind of smile that makes tomorrow say hello. "Then start with dinner. You cook. No smoke alarms this time." He cooked badly and loved better. He burned the onions and learned to lower the heat. He oversalted the soup and learned the word balance. He tucked Noah in and told him a bedtime story about a boy who could hear music in everything, in the hum of refrigerators, in the whir of bicycle spokes, in the hush of his mother's hands. The boy asked, "What's the difference between a mistake and a lesson?" And the story said, "Time." Letters kept arriving from Ruth. She sent a scanned photograph of Lionel playing under stage lights that looked like stars. She wrote about Sundays with her mother, about gumbo and loud card games and a laughter that never apologized for echoing. She said, "You have cousins. We argue and we dance. We will argue with you and dance with you too." On the day school let out for summer, they all drove to the city and walked into a club where an old saxophonist finished a set and told stories at the bar. When Mark said Lionel's name, the man's eyes went somewhere only memory can go. "He could make a horn sound like a person," he said, tapping the wooden bar like a metronome. "He played like he was telling you a secret you already knew." Noah fell asleep on the ride home holding the trumpet charm in his palm, the chain threaded through his fingers like he knew how to keep what matters from slipping. Months later, on a night that wore the same kind of moon the Polaroids had borrowed, Mark stood in the doorway of Emily's kitchen with flour on his shirt because pie crust is stubborn and so are men who want to do things right. He said, "I was wrong, and I will be wrong again, but I will not be gone again. If you ever doubt my love, open the window and listen. I'll be the man humming in the driveway, carrying bags, making a fool of himself to make you both laugh." She wiped a streak of flour from his cheek. "You already are," she said. He learned that shock is a door, not a destination, that the things that scare you can be teachers if you don't pretend not to hear them. He learned that being a father is not a headline but a habit. He learned that being a partner is not a pose but a practice. He learned that a question can be a weapon or a lantern depending on how long you're willing to hold it without swinging. On the anniversary of the day everything broke and began, they sat in the living room with boxes open, not storage boxes this time, but boxes of puzzle pieces. Noah chose the picture of a city skyline at dusk. They worked in the kind of silence that means everything is being said. When the last piece clicked into place, the boy leaned back and said, "We did it." Mark smiled at the echo. "We did." If you're hearing this and feel a whisper in your own life, a doubt that talks louder than love, a secret rattling its little tin cup for attention, don't wait for it to explode your house. Open the door yourself. Ask the hard question. Read the old letters. Call the aunt you haven't called. Sit at the table and tell the truth like it's dinner. You might find a family you didn't know you had, and a music you didn't know you could hear. And if this story held you for a while, if it made you breathe slower or think kinder, share it with someone who needs a lantern tonight. Like, comment, and subscribe so more people can find it. Somewhere out there is a father who forgot how to come home, a mother guarding a truth like a flame, a child waiting at a window. Sometimes happily ever after doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like 3 people at a kitchen table, passing the salt, telling the truth, listening to a song that's finally playing where everyone can hear it.